with an intro? You want me to intro it? Okay. Walter, we're ready. I'll start it off.
And just remember when you go out talk, this camera right here is the residents of Riviera Beach, so don't talk to them.
Talk to the people.
All right, give me a countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good afternoon, residents of Riviera Beach. This is our COVID-19 update. Today is March 24th, and I have here with me Chief John Kurt, our interim fire chief, and Councilman Doug Lawson. Councilman Lawson has assembled some questions that he would like to ask of staff as it relates to COVID-19 and what the city and what public safety is doing exclusively to protect our community and keep our community safe. Obviously, we know this is a fluid situation and information is changing moment by moment, second by second, and city staff is doing their best to ensure that the residents of this community are informed and updated as to what is occurring in their community as it relates to the pandemic. We are still communicating things that folks need to be conscientious of, and we still would be reiterating some of the guidance and direction from the CDC. So at this particular time, we're going to get right into the interview that's going to be conducted by Councilman Lawson of staff. And so without further ado, Councilman Doug Lawson.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. And so far, I just want everyone to know and all our residents to know the city is taking every precaution necessary to make sure that we're keeping our residents, our staff, and every department safe. Right now, our focus has been to allow for Mr. Evans to have the authority to oversee the operations of the city. We passed that at the last meeting, and we're letting him run and operate. And he's working on daily updates. So please, I want you guys to continue to tune in to Riviera Beach TV. If you have access to Facebook, make sure you like City of Riviera Beach's page, and make sure you continue to following for these city updates. And we're going to jump right into it. Right now, one of the questions that we've gathered from our Facebook questions and through text message and from residents is going to be, will there be a curfew implemented in the city of Riviera Beach? And Mr. Evans, if you could answer that one.
One of the things that the city of Riviera Beach has put in place when it passed the emergency declaration was the ability for the city manager to initiate a curfew if necessary. However, the policymakers said that this is such an impact to our community that the policymakers wanted to opine and provide perspective and ultimately direct the city manager to institute a curfew in the event that there is something that needs to be put in place as this pandemic continues to evolve. But one of the things I think that's important to note as it relates to a curfew, it's something that has to be done county-wide. You can't have a situation where you implement a curfew in Riviera Beach and you don't do it in the surrounding communities because it's going to confuse the public. And that's one of the things that we want to make sure that we do not confuse the public. A curfew, in my opinion, is something that we would do as a last resort, something that we are recommended to comply with the orders of the sheriff and the county. So it would be something that would be considered county-wide versus the city of Riviera Beach instituting one on its own.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Evans. Now, Chief Kurt, we spoke briefly about social distancing.
Right.
Our biggest concern that we're seeing, especially within that younger population, some of the residents, the ages 20 to 40, they are getting cabin fever after just a week. They're still doing house parties, house gatherings. They're getting together in social environments, and they're still moving in a way that is not being receptive to how serious this pandemic is actually happening. Chief, what do you recommend in regards to the social distancing, the house parties that are still going on, the beach gatherings? What is your recommendation as the chief of fire?
Well, this is a very important topic, and while I do understand this is an inconvenience for our community, especially for age groups that normally wait for this time of year when spring break is in full effect to gather with friends and have a good time, we have to look at this holistically, and we really need to look at the big picture. Some of the considerations we need to take into effect is we need to think about the community as a whole. This is something that's going to take a community effort. So instead of looking at what your desires and your needs are, there may be some sacrifices that you'll have to make for the community and also for some of the residents that live at home with you, whether it be mom, dad, grandma, grandpa. We have to consider these individuals when we make these decisions. We're still going to look to comply with social distancing. We are looking to keep that 6-foot distance when we do have to come into contact with someone for whatever that reason is. We also are looking to minimize social gatherings. While again, I understand it's an inconvenience, we really need to look at this as a community effort and really take our own personal thoughts and feelings out of what we think may be right or what may be wrong. You are receiving good guidance. This is a great opportunity for you to spend some time with family at home. Get to have some open communication, board games, card games. There's a lot that can be done at home, getting projects done around the house, maybe looking at decluttering of your home. There's just so many things that we can do, and actually let's look at this as an opportunity to spend some much needed time with our families and eliminate some of these larger gatherings.
Thank you so much, Chief. One of the things that I did notice is that with a lot of these gatherings and actually putting our workers, our staff, our officers at risk. There was a recent notice that West Palm Beach firefighters actually tested positive. I know that there was a report about a week and a half ago for Palm Beach Gardens firefighters that tested positive. What steps are we taking as a city here in Riviera Beach to keep our firefighters and our police safe? And also, how are we testing them when it comes to actually knowing about this COVID-19 and how they're being affected?
That's a great question. There's a lot that's going into this. This is a very fluid, very evolving situation. We've never dealt with this before. And I'm not just talking about Riviera Beach, I'm talking about the world. So we're actually learning as we go. But with Mr. Evans' guidance and some of the great work by our other departments, whether it be our Human Resources Department, our Risk Department, our Police Chief, and the staff at Fire Rescue, we've really put together a very robust, comprehensive plan to ensure that our employees are being looked after, tested, evaluated on a regular basis. So we have several different layers of safety measures that have been put in place for our first responders. The first thing that you may notice is if you have the need to dial 911, there's going to be a level of screening questions that are going to be asked of you. Those questions are basically to give us an idea of what the emergency is and whether or not there is a potential for coming into contact with a person that has COVID-19 and or COVID-19-like symptoms. Once our responders, whether it be police or fire, arrive to the call where aid is needed, we are then going to prompt a second layer of questions to maybe catch anything that might have been lost between the 911 caller and the dispatchers. So again, be patient with us. We're just trying to make sure that our first responders are staying safe so we can continue to provide municipal services as needed. If we do have a situation where we come across a patient who is a PUI, a person under investigation, a person that has flu-like symptoms or that is positive, and I can say, as of this moment, we do not have a positive case within the municipal boundaries of Riviera Beach. And we want to keep it that way. And these efforts are what's going to help us stay there. But we have paperwork that's being put in place. We have documentation for contacts. We've also worked with Region 7 in the state of Florida. Region 7 is where our county resides in regards to how the state is broken up into various regions. And they have very specific collection centers at the Hard Rock Stadium and at C.B. Smith Park in Broward County, where first responders receive priority testing so that we can get those results back as fast as possible and get those first responders back to work. So I can assure you, through the city's efforts, through the efforts throughout the state and nation, there are multiple control measures put in place, and we feel very confident with the protection that our first responders are getting.
Awesome. Thank you, Chief. Mr. Evans, one of the things that we know is that there's so many different challenges that we're seeing on social media. There's the see a shot, take a shot challenge. There's a see 10 push-ups, do 10 push-ups challenge. There's all these different things that people are trying to keep themselves engaged. I would like for us as a city to start the see a census, do a census challenge. If people are online doing the census and getting this updated, can you explain to our residents the importance of the census, why they should complete it, and what steps they need to take to actually getting it done, and how it's going to benefit our city right now going into the future?
Absolutely. The census is required by the U.S. Constitution, and the census really is an economic engine for our state and our nation for that matter. The city of Riviera Beach over the last 10 years has collected $1.98 million from CDBG funding, which is federal funding that goes to the state, then to the county, and then ultimately remitted to the city for certain projects throughout our community. But the census is a tool that is utilized to be able to set funding priorities and to look at redistricting and to really have a major impact on the way in which we live our lives. Over the next 10 years, this census is anticipated to determine where $4 trillion worth of federal funds will go. So it is so important that we as a city participate. In the last census, 2010, our participation rate was 55%. We have left millions of dollars on the table. This year's census, our participation rate is 15%. The state average is 19. Obviously, knowing that we have this pandemic that's impacting our community, but I certainly encourage you all to take the census. It's such an important tool. If we as a city have more than 50,000 residents, we can then become an entitled city and receive appropriations directly to us to be able to combat some of the social and economic and infrastructure challenges we have here in our city. So the challenge is out, and I certainly would encourage all residents to participate in the census. It can be done electronically. It can be done telephonically. There are multiple ways. There are folks that will be coming out to your home, I'm assuming probably later on in the year than they normally would, to collect the data. The information is protected. There is no census taker that will share your information, or the government will not be tracking you down or sharing that information with law enforcement. Actually, it's stringent penalties in the event that that information is used inappropriately. So from the city of Riviera Beach's standpoint, that is a major priority for us because it determines so much funding and representation in the House of Representatives, and we want to make sure we're represented. It's such a critical thing, and certainly, Councilman, I can't thank you enough for the opportunity of bringing that up, as it's certainly something that will become forgotten as we are trying to challenge, or being challenged with this pandemic, how important the census really is to our community.
And Mr. Evans, I know this is something you've been pushing and you've been consistent with this. So I want our residents that are watching, please understand that the census is vital for us to be able to do our jobs, for Mr. Evans to continue to lead our city, for us to get the funding necessary, to assist with our small businesses, our large businesses, to assist with all the residents. Guys, while we're going through this crisis that we're experiencing, take time to really just focus on what we can do to make sure our kids and our grandkids are taken care of. Do something that's going to be beneficial. Instead of having gatherings, instead of not social distancing, do the things that's necessary to help keep our first responders safe, to keep our city safe, and to continue to push forward with our city. Mr. Evans, a lot of the questions that we've been addressing today have come directly from our residents. As the elected officials, we deal with them on a day-to-day basis. Our job is to be the voice for them, to really just kind of transfer their energy over to you and say, Mr. Evans, fix it. Right now, what would you say is the biggest hurdle that you're running into from operating, going through this crisis, and things that you need support and help with, not just as a city, but as the residents of Riviera Beach? What issues and concerns can we address, and can they do to kind of make your job a little easier for us?
One of the things that is very challenging for us now is infrastructure, city facilities that perform with your employees. We have facilities that are at the end of their useful life that are not modern facilities that provide for some challenges. So some of the technology infrastructure and some of the features that we need in our facilities is desperately needed when we look at some of our life safety facilities. So those are some things that we need to address. Infrastructure, water, sewer infrastructure is a major priority for this administration and this council, and obviously you all have taken some steps to improve that. But as we're tackling this pandemic, one of the challenges I think that is great for us is the capacity and the ability from our fire service personnel to be able to provide core services. We had a discussion with the board and looking to implement some changes in the way in which we collect revenue and looking at a fire assessment fee. But if the chief was to tell you now that if we had a situation where a shift was impacted and we had to bring in additional personnel, we're stretched very thin with regards to our staffing complement when it comes to our first responders on the fire side. And so that's one of the major things when you're tackling this pandemic. Remember that first responders are the individuals that are going to treat the patient, have the first interaction with the patient, and then transfer them to the healthcare professionals. So making sure that we have the right complement and the right amount of fire personnel is something that is a major priority for us as we move forward. And how do we continue to fund that? The other element that I think is very important is how do we continue to maintain city services and operations and keep our employees gainfully employed and compensated during this pandemic. We're seeing a situation where there's major economic challenges associated with this. The governor has asked his cabinet to put out some information or some staff to do a survey of businesses in the state. And the Florida Business Damage Assessment Survey was provided, and over 6,000 businesses responded, and they combined to say that there is approximately 40,000 people that were impacted associated with this, 31,000 being laid off temporarily, 9,000 being laid off permanently. The Department of Economic Opportunities has seen their calls increase from 28,000 to 130,000 in a span from Monday to Thursday. Reemployment assistance has gone up 11% from the week prior. So our concern is looking at the infrastructure, tackling this pandemic, and then what the economic challenges are going to be for our community, because our community is very diverse. And when the economy gets a cough, we get the flu. And so we need to be conscientious of how we can assist and create opportunities for our local businesses to be successful. And as an employer, how do we keep folks gainfully employed to continue to provide service and not have any major impacts on this economy, because that is a concern that we have moving forward.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. That is exactly what we're looking for. We need to realize that we as a city are going to continue to push forward even as we get past this pandemic. We have to take the steps necessary to effectually hit this head on, to attack this head on, and to make sure we get through it. And once we do get through it, what's going to happen next? Mr. Evans has laid out a plan of what we need to do and what we're going to do moving forward, and we need to continue to follow that. So Mr. Evans and Chief, thank you guys so much for just taking the time to address some of the concerns of the residents. And I know you guys have been constantly doing that. Residents that are watching, please continue to just like our social media pages. Make sure you're following on Channel 18. Make sure that you're on YouTube and following the City of Riviera Beach, because Mr. Evans, Chief Curd, Chief Osgood will be giving constant updates as we go through this crisis. So please continue to watch us. Gentlemen, if you have any last words for our city, you can give them now.
Mr. Evans?
Again, thank you for the residents for watching this broadcast. A couple of things that I think are germane to what we talked about is there's been constant communications with regards to the beach. Is the beach open? No, the beach is not open. Can we walk on the beach? Absolutely not. Under the guidance and direction from law enforcement professionals throughout this county, we have prohibited access to the beach, and we will be enforcing that. Another thing that we're looking to do that you'll get some information on here shortly is we're going to have a community conference call on Thursday evening at about 6:30 to brief the community in regards to what's happening on the emergency operations side. So there's a lot of things that are happening. We want to keep you informed, but please adhere to the guidelines and direction provided by the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Those tools are invaluable, and we will get through this. We just have to be mindful that it's going to be a lot of inconveniences associated with this pandemic, but your staff is committed and working through these matters very diligently, very astutely, and keeping our elected officials informed. And their leadership has been tremendous as we've gone through this situation. Chief?
First of all, I'd like to thank the community, as I'm sure the sentiment holds true for everyone up here. Thank you for the opportunity to serve this community. I can assure you that Riviera Beach Police and Riviera Beach Fire Rescue, the men and women that make up your public safety department, are working endlessly, tirelessly, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and we're going to ensure that we get through this. So we will continue to be on the forefront, on the front line, and we're going to be here for you to ensure that we get through this together. Thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. And City, we are continue to work with you, to support you, and continue to be there for you. So any questions, concerns, you can reach out to us as your electeds. That's why you put us here, to be your voice for you. So our goal is to continue to keep you updated, to continue to keep us focused on working together to get through this pandemic. We're going to continue to pray as one city, the best city to live, work, and play, the city of Riviera Beach. So we're here to support you. Thank you.